of the energy that can be brought to being a platform assistant for our people who got to audition for being a platform assistant yesterday. I'll talk more about that in just a few moments. I'm going to invite you to get seated in your chairs and get ready for our time of meditation. And just allow yourself to get settled. Allow your feet to sit firmly on the floor, your back supported by the chair, your arms resting by your side or in your lap. And just take a moment, if you're comfortable, maybe close your eyes and then focus inward on the breath. Allow yourself to focus on that divine presence, that divine beingness, that expression of who you are. You and the divine are not separate. Everyone is part of this divine presence that lives and moves and has its being in all life, in all forms, in all of existence. And as you settle into this presence, I invite you to take on the following affirmation. I have come here to be courageous. I have come here to be courageous, to be a light unto the world. Being courageous does not mean you have no fear. It means you feel the fear, but don't allow it to stop you. Courage is the capacity to act from the heart, even when circumstances seem impossible. Break through the obstacles that hold you back with the courage that comes from knowing God lives and moves through you. I have come here to be courageous. I have come here to be a light. Sit in this knowingness for a few moments as we enter the silence. Enter the silence. Give yourself a few more moments in this space as you bring your awareness back to this idea that I have come here to be courageous. Know this truth deep in your heart, deep in your soul, that you have the power and the presence of that divine essence within you. And it doesn't mean that we don't have human emotions. We allow ourselves to listen to that little voice of courage and allow it to strengthen our way. Insecurity and doubt are powerless to stop me. I am courageous. I break through obstacles by assessing the power of God, living, moving, and acting through me. I have come here to be courageous. Ever so gently, I invite you to bring your awareness back to your body temple. Gently, maybe start allowing yourself to move fingers and toes. Maybe roll your shoulders or roll your neck or stretch just ever so gently. And bring your awareness back to the body. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and return to this space. How was that this morning? Isn't that divine presence within us always powerful, though, when we allow it to be? So I want to say good morning. I want to say welcome to each and every one of you as we join together here. This month's theme, you might have seen it on the event sheet and seen it on our imaging for this month, honoring the light within. What does this mean? This means that this month, during our Sunday service messaging, we're focusing on recognizing the light in every single one of us, the light within all of us. We all have this spark of divinity within us. Now, Unity affirms this in their very principles. Unity Principle 1 says that the divine is everywhere and always present. In every circumstance, this divine energy underlies the very nature and existence of the universe, and it is good. And Principles 2 states that as humans, being these living beings in this existence, that we are good because we are connected and an expression of this divine presence. In other words, Unity affirms in every bit of our teaching that we are each an Eachness in the Allness of God. Every single one of us. But here we don't just acknowledge this oneness, this connection, the God presence in ourselves, we acknowledge it in each other. Now, we might call that different names: Christ consciousness, Buddha nature, Atman, spirit, soul, universe, infinite beingness. There's 100 names that we could give this presence, but we recognize it and we honor it. Now, last week, Reverend Ron gave his final message as minister of our congregation. And so this month we're also recognizing that we are in the midst of transition. We can't ignore that aspect of where we are. We're in a period of liminality. Now, Ron last week asked us to open ourselves up to turning on this spiritual light, to accepting that change is part of this human existence, the human experience. And he mentioned the long list of traditions that use light as a symbol and a metaphor for the divine presence within. So I'm not going to list them again. You're free to look at his talk from last week and or explore them on your own. But today I would like to expand upon this month's theme by exploring both our individual light and our collective light, recognizing at the same time that we are in the midst of this transition. We are in the midst of a new journey. And I want to speak to that both on an individual and a group level. Speak to that experience. So I want to start by reintroducing this verse from the Gospel of Thomas. I'm going to say the whole thing this time, but before I do, for those who are unfamiliar with the Gospel of Thomas, you might say, I don't remember that from my Bible studies. And you wouldn't. It's a book of Jesus' sayings that is thought to be a direct kind of descendant, so to speak, of this Q document that was thought to inform the Gospels, the canonical Gospels in the Bible, as well as other works. And so it was rediscovered back in 1946 in the Egyptian town of Nag Hammadi as part of a collection of early Christian and Gnostic writings, and it's since been translated. The version that was discovered was in the Coptic. So the following saying is a translation based on William Duffy's expanded version. And it says, Jesus said, if they say to you, where do you come from? Say to them, we come out of the light, from the place where the light has come into being. Outward, by our hands as one, we stood on our feet and appeared forth in our true likeness. If they say to you, who are you to say this? Say, we are his sons. We are the chosen of the living Father. If they ask you, what is the sign of the living Father in you? Say to them, it is movement and rest. In this verse, Jesus is purported to have acknowledged that inner light, this spark of divinity, and this verse is not unlike some of the verses we see in the canonical Gospels. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that this might be an actual saying of Jesus. This verse, though, he also appears to speak to our human expression and recognizes that this human expression is one with the divine. It's not separate. It's an expression of it. Simply by being alive, by having this life force moving through us, it is evidence of this underlying universal divine energy and presence that we call God. Now, I implore you to go and check out the Gospel of Thomas for yourself. It is an interesting book of mystical, sometimes cryptic sayings that speak to our non-dual nature. But Jesus mentions light 12 times in the Gospel of Thomas, and almost just as many in every other gospel from the scriptures. This light that is the presence of us, that moves and lives and has its being in us. Not only do we come from the light, not only do we return to the light, have our presence in the light, we are light even in this material realm. But I also want to speak to our human situation, not just the spiritual aspect of what's going on. And while light is a symbol of this divine presence, it also can be a metaphor for our life journey, a metaphor for our human experience. So over the past 2 weeks, I've turned to a book that I have found comforting in the past when in the midst of transition, and that is Reverend Ellen Davenport's book, Hell in the Hallway, Light at the Door. How to Move Gracefully Through Change into Renewed and Abundant Life. And if you haven't read this book, it gives you a wide kind of variety of different kind of life experiences that we go through and what it's like being in the hallway of those experiences when we're in the midst of transition. So through this metaphor of the hallway, I'm hoping that it represents change, but I'm hoping we can see ourselves and understand that this congregation is in a metaphysical and metaphorical hallway, so to speak, waiting for the next door to open, waiting to become what we will become with our next spiritual leader. And so we can ask ourselves, can I see the light at the door? Even in the midst of what might feel fearful, can you see the light at the door? Now, Ellen Davenport brings up two key points in her book that I want to share with you. Two key kind of features or pieces of advice. And she says, so here you are in a crowded hallway, anticipating with others what might happen next, waiting to know your mutual fate. So she says, close your eyes and ask yourself silently, what is mine to do? How can I best serve others as we traverse this time of uncertainty? How can we take every opportunity to change for the better, individually and together? Now, before I get into her other pieces of advice, I want to note that we were faced with a similar situation. It was a different situation back in 2018. We lost our building due to storm damage. We opted to give that up. And we also lost our beloved Reverend Joanne Burns as she decided to leave our congregation and move on to other opportunities. And this happened in such a short window of time that it might have brought up some feelings and emotions for you that you might recall. Now, when Reverend Joe first stepped down, I remember feeling angry and fearful. I remember questioning if I should even remain in the congregation. I remember thinking, well, if she doesn't have faith in us, how can I? But it wasn't about that. Her decision had been made based on where she was and based on where she needed to be. It wasn't about me. And so it took some time for my fears to subside, and I can't remember if it was days or weeks, honestly. After the storm, all that time seems to blur together. I just remember the feeling, and then remember having this awareness, oh. As the fear subsided, I started to hear this small voice. And I had trouble recognizing it through our collective loss and through my own personal loss. Here, myself and my husband were working to rebuild our home and trying to get electricity restored and everything else and figuring out how much damage we had. Yet there it was a little voice of courage. And Rosa remembers that conversation probably. It was courage to step up and to do what was mine to do. And although Reverend Ron and I have never really talked about his decision, the details of his decision, I imagine he experienced a similar voice of courage to step up and do what he needed to do for our congregation. But had I not stepped up, not only would I have not been where I am spiritually now today, I wouldn't be on the precipice of my next career move. So I've completed the prerequisites, as you know, and I'm getting ready to apply for the ministerial program. And yes, I had an inkling that I would be an LUT, but I wasn't sure about the minister thing until about 2 years ago. But I'm sure that there are others who saw this courage in me when I couldn't recognize it in myself. I'm sure that there are others who saw the light at the end of my hallway, even when I couldn't see it. And now many of you are stepping up to this challenge. So yesterday we had several members of our congregation come together to practice being platform assistants. We called an audition, but it was really for them. They were listening to that small voice of courage to see, is this mine to do? And they haven't made their final decisions yet. We're going to have some more practice. But they're starting to take those steps. And others have reached out to me, have reached out to board members, have reached out to committee members and said, hey, how can I serve? How can I be of service? So for everyone who is in a role of service or who is stepping up to experiment and see, is this for me? Or for those of you who are just having the courage to explore your inner awareness to say, what is mine to do? Thank you. We can't do it alone. So Ellen Davenport does offer a lot of advice. So 2 other pieces of advice I would like to share with you is let other people support you on this journey. I can't do it alone. Bill can't do it alone. Donald certainly can't do it alone. We're all here together. We each have a light, have something to bring. And so let's come together. Ask for support if you need it. Be of service if you feel it's yours to do, if you feel that there's some way that you can serve. The second piece of advice she gives that I also want to share with you is don't rush to find a way out. This process is going to take a little while. It's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be in the snap of a finger. It's not going to be something that we can just, hey, UWM, this is who we want. There's paperwork and there's other things. The board has to make decisions. The congregation needs to come together and say, hey, board, this is what we're interested in. And then the board makes that decision. All these things, there's questions to be asked. There's lots of things to go about this process to know what is the best direction for us to do to move forward. But what happens is we're fully spiritual and we're fully human. And what does our human side like to do? It doesn't like change, that's for sure. So it tends to react, and it does this one of 2 ways. It doesn't want the door behind to shut, so it tries to pry it back open. I want to go back to where we were. Or you want to move forward so fast, you just want to get to the next doorway. You don't want to be in the hallway. You don't want to be in the midst of uncertainty. So this transition, like all transitions, may bring up some stuff. It may bring up some past experiences you've had, some past emotions, some past hurts, some past traumas. Don't be surprised. And so I want to recognize that this period may feel uncomfortable. It may be brimming with some uncertainty about who is going to be our leader. How do we move on from here? What is the next steps going to look like? Who are we going to look like on the other side? And I also recognize that this may bring up some memories, some sadness about how we've transitioned between spiritual leaders in the past. And so allow yourself to sit in that. It may bring up a sense of loss, a sense of grief, a sense of remembering those spiritual leaders who we've had in our life, through, multiple spiritual leaders throughout our life that are no longer there to guide us. And I know Reverend Ron's still going to be a part of this community, but it still may bring up some of this stuff for you. And for some of you, it may bring up a feeling that's very freeing, a feeling of excitement, a feeling of knowing we're going to come back to the table once again and get to choose what our direction is moving forward. And we will, as a group. It may feel like a hallway brimming with possibility and multiple doorways and multiple opportunities. And most of you, if not all of you, are going to oscillate between all of these feelings. You're going to feel some uncomfortableness, some fear. You're going to feel some sadness, and you're going to feel some excitement about what's to come. And it's okay. Wherever you are, I encourage you, I invite you to give yourself time to process where you are. Try not to rush this process. Rather than label your feelings good or bad, right or wrong, positive or negative, recognize that in some small way you are grieving what was and getting ready for what is. You are processing a change. It's okay to feel whatever it is you feel. There is no one right way or wrong way to process change. So I want to invite you to honor how this light is expressing as you and in you during this process. Reverend Ron will continue to call this his spiritual home, and I have no doubt, as I've seen this past week, that he's going to continue to offer his guidance and his support as we go through this transition. We will certainly miss his presence as our minister. Now, as we go through this process together, I also want you to encourage you to give grace and compassion to yourself and to others. So guess what happens when we get caught in this hallway of transition? Sometimes we respond. Sometimes we react. And it's not always pretty. And we all react differently. And maybe you have some past hurts that are coming up from you, or some past feelings of rejection, or past, feelings of trauma, or anything else that might be bubbling up to the surface during this time. But so might other people. You don't know what kind of hurts, what kind of feelings other members of this congregation might be holding, might be nursing, might be processing. So I'd invite you to hold yourself and others with grace, with compassion. Rather than label them, or rather than label yourself by an emotion, or by a behavior, or by a reaction, consider the light that they are. Consider the light that you are. We can be too quick to label, too quick to judge, too quick to react to another's reaction. And so I just invite you to remind yourself of that light, the light within you and the light within them. Challenge yourself to see the light in yourself and in others in every circumstance, every situation, especially as we move forward. Know that each of us has our own hallways of change, inner hallways, physical hallways that we are going through, even though we are in the midst of this group hallway. I am not solely my human emotions or my human reactions, and neither are you. We are all more than that. We are a presence of light. We come from the light, have our being in the light, and will return to the light. Can you ask yourself, can I see my light even in the seeming darkness of the hallway? Can I see the light of others even in the seeming darkness of the hallway? So next week, I'm going to look at the idea of luminous mind and our Christ consciousness and how that relates to Buddha nature. And I hope you will join us next Sunday as we continue this series about honoring the light within. Thank you. So we're going to transition to our time of giving here, and I'm going to go ahead and invite up our singers. If you have your gift with you, if you feel spiritually fed this morning, want to give as source, being a part of this cycle of giving and receiving, I invite you to get that gift ready. And we say thank you from giving to this community as only you can give. And now if we could say our offering blessing. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And I love the energy of having the singers up here as I say that. Wow. Okay.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful for all that I am. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful for all that I have. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful. I am so blessed.